Good morning, Maya. Chris, good to see you as well. Good to see everybody. Oh my goodness, got my PowerPoint all messed up. Let me get that back into the right place. There we go. I was in Asheville and Gatlinburg. Wow, Gatlinburg is pretty cool too. I love the North Carolina, Tennessee mountains. They are just so freaking beautiful. Oh my goodness, it's amazing. Good morning, Aaron. It's good to see you. Chris, good to see you. Oh, Chris worked all weekend long. Sorry about that. That was a bummer. I did some umpiring this weekend. We got rained out on Sunday. Always a bummer. Oh, okay. Cool. Riley baked a cake on Sunday. Was it edible? That's the question, Riley. You baked a cake, but could anybody eat it? Let's see. All right. Good deal. So today we're going to talk a little bit about stress. Aaron Melinda's tried Korean corn dogs in Atlanta. What exactly is a Korean corn dog? If you could type in the chat bar and let us all know what a Korean corn dog actually tastes like. Right, I'll bet it was, Aish. Yeah, right. That was my exact question exactly, Chris. What in the heck is a Korean corn dog? Hopefully we'll be enlightened about that in just a second. So how many of you feel stressed out from time to time? How many of you feel extra stressed because of the pandemic virus? How many of you are stressed out sitting at home because you can't go to work, because you can't see people? The question is, how much stress are you experiencing right now? I see we've got some people saying they experience some stress there. Chris, Aaron, Maya, everybody getting stressed out, right? 379 days a year. Is that what you're trying to tell me, Michael Kirko? Okay. Right. So today we're going to talk, next couple of days, we're going to talk a little bit about stress. Today I'm going to talk about the biology of the stress response. And then the reason that this is interesting to psychologists is because A, this is part of the nervous system, and B, there are ways that you can learn to minimize the negative effects that stress happens to have on you. So hopefully what we're going to do this week is learn a little bit about stress and maybe develop some inspirations about how we might be better able to deal with the stress that is a natural and normal part of life. Okay, let's see. So Etta, you actually lived in Chicago. It is pretty stressful what was exactly stressful to you about living in Chicago, Etta? I know what I would think, but I'd be curious to hear what you say. Yes, we're going to talk a little bit about the Holmes Rahe life stress inventory, Mike. And in fact, I'm going to have you take the Rahe Holmes stress inventory as well as a perceived stress scale. And we're going to talk about that tonight. Or actually in webinar this week. It'll be tonight, tomorrow, or Thursday. So we're going to talk a little bit about stress, and I've also got a TED Talk video about the proper orientation that you should have towards stress. This TED Talk is really, really amazing and interesting, and I think you'll like it. So we'll talk about that a little bit later on today. But that's going to be what we're going to talk about tonight in webinar. Etta says she worked too much in Chicago. You know, working too much can make you stressful. Is it the hours at work that make work stressful, or is it other qualities at work that make it stressful? I'd be curious. Do you think it was just the number of hours you worked, Etta? So it was the number of hours? What was it about the number of hours that caused the stress? I'm not questioning whether or not you had stress, but I'm trying to figure out exactly what was it that made that stressful. Because if you think about it, we all get up and have to do something 7 days a week. Why not go to work 7 days a week? Who knows? She was tired. You were tired from working, right? I guess that makes sense. And what you're saying is that having to do the other things outside of work that go along with being an adult were probably too difficult to do because you were stressed out from working. I get that. I get that. Cool. All right. So, this week we're talking about health psychology. Chapter 11 is about health psychology. And health psychologists are those psychologists who help people achieve well-being. So, if you remember when we were talking about the subfields of psychology in chapter 1, one type of psychologist that you can be is a health psychologist, or what sometimes people call a behavioral health psychologist. And behavioral health is the scientific study of the factors that affect the health and well-being of people. Now, this is an interdisciplinary approach, but we're going to approach it from the psychology point of view this week. And so there are certain things you can do, certain habits you can develop as an adult, certain ways of dealing with the world that make you a healthier, happier person. And one of the things that psychology attempts to do is to use what we've learned to help people live healthier, happier, longer lives. And so a behavioral health psychologist is just someone who's interested in understanding what factors affect the quality of human life, and how can we give these factors, transmit these factors to the general population to help everybody live better lives. Hi, Jessica. It's good to see you. Welcome to class. We're just talking about the health psychology, which is another subfield of psychology. And they're interested in well-being, which is a positive state that includes the striving for optimal health and life satisfaction. So well-being means you're happy, but it also means you're feeling fulfilled at work. True health isn't just about being healthy in body, but it's about being healthy in mind as well. So when we talk about helping people out, we talk about this omnibus thing we call well-being, and that's being physically healthy and also emotionally healthy. Okay, and yes, as let's see, Aaron mentions there are certain things you can do to make yourself a little less stress-free, and yoga and meditation is certainly one of them. Now, what you're going to probably appreciate, because you've been in this class for 10 weeks already, is that there's really no one factor that affects your health and well-being. Instead, what health behaviorists understand is that really there are not only biological factors, genetic factors that affect our health and well-being, but there are also psychological factors, orientations that we develop early in life, and also social conditions that affect our overall health and well-being. So it's not just one thing. When you're trying to ask the question, what is it that causes people to have a state of well-being? Really, you have to sort of appreciate the human being in context, their biological predispositions, their psychological predispositions, and the social conditions that they find themselves in. In fact, Etta, you talking about the stress of living in Chicago, you're talking about the effect that a social condition had on your level of stress and well-being, right? So, what are the areas that that health psychologists are interested in? Well, if you look in Chapter 11, what you're going to notice is that Chapter 11 talks about several different categories of health behaviors that psychologists attempt to change people's behaviors and give them healthier predispositions to life. So your book is going to talk a little bit about smoking, alcohol, and drug abuse. Your book is going to talk about unhealthy eating behaviors, from overeating and being overweight to restricted diets like bulimia and anorexia. And your book's going to talk a little bit about exercise and its effect on your health. And your book's also going to talk about healthy sexual practices. All right. Now, what I'm going to do for this week's lecture is I'm just going to focus on the stress aspect of health psychology, because health psychologists are very interested in understanding what stress is and how our bodies are affected by the level of stress that we experience. Um, and, Chris brings up a very good point about the pandemic negatively affecting people on a social level. Absolutely. One of the things that affects our well being, Chris, are our social conditions. So when you put somebody in semi isolation, as the pandemic has done, this negatively affects their well being. Now, what we're going to talk about in webinar, if you come this week, Chris, is we're going to ask the difficult question: are more lives lost keeping kids out of school and closing the United States down than we would lose if we open the United States up and let people get sick? So there really is a cost-benefit analysis that we have to do when we're deciding whether or not we want to close down schools, or close down workplaces, or close down people's ability to go out for social events. I mean, it may not seem like much to you, but being able to go out to a restaurant, go out to a bar, go out to the gym, these sort of social activities really help us deal with our stress, right? And Christy Comer suggests she lost her bartending job when the pandemic started and began full-time online, along with losing your fiance. So we can all agree that 2020 just sucks. Right. I mean, and the pandemic affected all of these things. So it took away your job. It made you move your schooling to a non-social or sort of model. And, I wouldn't doubt that the stress of the pandemic may have affected your romantic relationship, Christy. Yeah, so there are certainly these sort of effects that the event has, that the pandemic has. Now the pandemic is not helping. Wow, we've got a lot of comments that people are making about the effect that the pandemic has had on their friends and themselves. I hope everybody comes to webinar this week so that we can talk about the effects that these things are having on your stress levels and mental health. These are all very great points. It seems to me like we've hit a sore spot for students. Now, if you look down here in the red, I just sort of give you an idea of how we might look at these different behavioral activities and how they affect our well-being. And so, for example, behavioral psychologists who are interested in looking at the effect between physical exercise and well-being sort of have discovered these sorts of links, so that exercise lowers your blood pressure and it decreases your risk of heart disease. But you know what? Aerobic exercise also protects your cognitive functioning as you get older. And you know what? Exercising also elevates your mood and decreases levels of depression. So really, you can think about this one health behavior as having this cascade of positive effects on our physical and psychological well-being. And so this is why psychologists are interested in health and health behaviors. It's good to see you, Nicole. We were just talking about stress and the effect that the pandemic has had on our social activities and our level of stress. Nicole, you have children, so you're probably the kind of person that could really comment that the effect of not going to school has on children. I'm sure your kids are climbing the curtains out of boredom and lack of social stimulation because they can't go to school. And tonight, and for the rest of the week, we're going to be talking about the effect that the pandemic's had on our stress level. So I hope you come to webinar this week, Nicole, and share your experiences. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about stress. Stress is a non-specific, a generalized response of the body to any demand placed on it. Now, it can be something like being involved in a legal trial. It can be something like being involved in a bad relationship. It can be something like having stress at work. You know what, though? Actually, any demand to adjust your behavior is what we would call a stressor. So if you are walking down the hall and somebody steps in front of you and you have to walk around them, that is a stressor, and your body is going to respond to that simple stressor with a stress response. So stress, although we tend to think of it as really important, deep things, anytime your body has to change and respond to the environment in some way, in a sense, your body's going to register that change in a generalized function. And we will call that generalized response to a stressor, we'll call that stress. Now, when we talk about stressor, your book's going to talk about two sort of different categories of stressors, and I think you can probably appreciate these. The first are what we would call major life stressors. So losing your job because of the pandemic is a major life stressor. Breaking up with a boyfriend, girlfriend is a major life stressor. So these huge events do cause a certain amount of stress on us. So anytime we get these big changes, they have an effect on our body. And so we'll call these major stressors. Now, the crazy thing is, good events can also be stressful. How many of you have ever had a baby before, Nicole? Talk to me, girl. Having a baby is the most wonderful thing in the entire world. It is so happy planning for a baby and getting excited, but it's totally stressful because there are all these decisions that you've got to make. Getting married, oh my God, Nicole, right? That's a positive event, but you know what? It causes a certain amount of stress when you're planning the wedding. And in fact, I don't know about y'all, but for me, the best part of my wedding was the day it was over and I was finally done with all the stress involved in that particular event, right? If you've ever gone on vacation, hell, that's stressful, right? You've got to make sure to pack, you've got to get the airline tickets, you got to make sure you don't forget the power charger, you have to get to the airport on time, it's Uber, it's taxis, it's all this stuff. Stress, stress, stress. So the weird thing is, not only do we have negative stress events or distress, but we also have positive stress related to positive events or eustress. But both of these kinds of major events still cause physiological effects to our body. Now, at the same time, we also have just daily hassles, the grind. So the pandemic may cause you to have to make changes to your day-to-day life, which are stressful. So instead of sitting in a classroom, you're having to log on and figure a technology out every day. And every day you struggle with that technology. That's just a daily hassle. Can some people give me some examples of some daily hassles that you have? Just small, minor inconveniences that happen every stinking day. Anybody? 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 I'd be curious to hear what the daily stresses the daily hassles are for you. Keeping the home clean. Preach, Christy. Losing service. Taking care of pets. Customers at work being morons. Yes, thank you very much. You got a babysitting, homework. Okay, every last one of those things. It's just a little nag, right? It's not a big thing, but it's a little nag. So you can think about these two kinds of stressors. We got these major life events and we got these small, niggling day-to-day sort of stressors. Now, what I have in your course resources folder is two questionnaires. One that measures the major life stressors, and I invite you to take that. And then and that's the Holmes-Rahe stress scale. So take that and see how many major life stressors you've had in the past 12 months. And then I also have what's called a perceived stress scale, which measures sort of the day-to-day hassles that you feel impeding in on you every day. I invite you to take both of those stress inventories to evaluate your level of stress. And I'm hoping you take those before you come to webinar this week. And I'm going to send a remind text out about it a little bit later this afternoon. Making lunch, yes, that can be a stressful thing. You know, every night I cook dinner at the house and I wash dishes and I just want to jump out of a window sometimes if I have to look at another stinking dirty dish in the sink. if they have to wash another pot. It just freaking kills me, right? Getting assignments in. Yes, that's also a stressful thing too, Chris. Absolutely. Having to clean the kitchen, right? I wonder if celebrities that have people that do these things, if their life is less stressful, or do they just go find new things to stress out about? You know what I mean? So it's hard for me to imagine Kanye West washing dishes after dinner, right? What does he get stressed about? I don't know. Now, here's the thing. You have your body, and your brain is connected. Your brain is connected to your body in such a way that you can change your body's physiological responses based upon the threat level that you have in your environment. So if you remember, we have this amygdala. It's your fight or flight center. It's where you have your primary emotional responses. Now it connects to your frontal lobe, but those two things sort of create your emotional experiences. When your amygdala fires up, it activates your pituitary gland, which releases this hormone called ACTH, which causes your adrenal glands to release cortisol and adrenaline into your body, which causes this cascade of physiological effects in your body. Okay, so you've got your amygdala. You get stressed out because, Riley, you wake up and you realize that you haven't done your psychology assignment, and all of a sudden your amygdala fires up with an emotional response. It activates this part of your HPA axis, which is your hypothalamus pituitary adrenaline axis. Your pituitary gland dumps this ACTH into your system, which causes your adrenal glands to start creating cortisol and adrenaline, which causes physiological effects. Now, when you're having a sympathetic nervous response, you're being aroused. So we have these two kinds of effects. Sometimes our amygdala causes our body to mobilize for fight or flight. We get excited and aroused. This is called a sympathetic nervous response. And at the same time that our body is releasing cortisol, this cortisol is going back up to our pituitary gland, creating the exact opposite effect. It's sort of this negative feedback loop, and it causes us to actually calm back down. So the deal is, when something scares us, our adrenaline drops. Our adrenal gland drops cortisol and adrenaline in our system, which causes us to get aroused. And then that cortisol quickly shuts our system back down and makes us relax, all right? And we have what's called a parasympathetic nervous response. Now, what happens is your body's systems, in a sympathetic nervous response, your body's physical systems, all of your organs, prepare for fight or flight. Your lungs, your blood pressure increases, your pupils dilate, your respiration increases, your heart starts beating fast, and your digestive processes stop, because now is not the time to eat. And this is sort of a fight or flight response. Now, as soon as you relax, the organs kind of change and they go back the exact opposite way. Your pupils contract, your respiration decreases, your heart rate decreases, and your digestion starts to come back around. And this is why when you're stressed out, sometimes you get an upset stomach, because your body can't engage in the digestion process that it normally does when you're relaxed. Does that make sense? So you have these two sort of effects. Same organs, but the nerves, you have nerves that cause these organs to change in a pattern that prepares you for action when you're afraid, the sympathetic nervous response. And then you have a set of nerves that go to the same organs that change their pattern of function so that you can eat or make romance when you're not under the threat. A particular threat. Now, the weird thing is your sympathetic and your parasympathetic nervous system, actually, change throughout the day. So when you wake up in the morning, about a half an hour after you wake up, your body has its maximum sympathetic nervous response, and you have the maximum amount of cortisol dumped into your brain. It's in your body. It's your morning's cup of coffee. Right after we wake up, we have sort of a natural sympathetic response, and that's why we're so aroused first thing in the morning. And then as the day proceeds on, our cortisol level drops to its lowest point at night, which is when we sleep as animals. So we have a day-to-day fluctuation of our sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, all right? But we're going to talk specifically about what happens when this system is activated for a long time. Okay, now the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system was built for short duration threats. It was built for when the bear comes chasing after you, so you can mobilize your body to fight the bear, and then as soon as you get away from the bear, you go back into a state of relaxation and your parasympathetic system takes over, right? Now, it turns out that in modern day life, the bear sometimes never goes home, right? You've always got those bills on your back. You've always got that good or bad relationship on your back. You've always got that responsibility beating down on you. And sometimes people go into what we would call prolonged sympathetic nervous responses, where your body is in fight or flight response for extended periods of time. And this is what we would call the experience of chronic stress. And the weird thing is, all of these hormones that are released in a sympathetic nervous response are really good in the short term, but the effects that they have in the long term are actually bad for your body. So while it's okay to have a brief, short-lived sympathetic nervous response, if you get stressed out and your body is in fight or flight for days, weeks, or months, you will start to have physiological breakdowns associated with this elevated level of stress, right? Okay, and so the guy who identified this was a fellow named Hans Selye, and he identified what he called the general adaptation syndrome decades ago. I think it may have been 60, 70 years ago. And so he argued, so whenever a stressor occurs into our environment, all right, we go into what he calls the alarm stage, and actually your immune response drops for a short term as your body prepares itself to fight. And then, so you have this alarm stage that lasts just a short time. And then what happens is these processes that are reverse, and you build up sort of an immune response to potential threats coming into your body. White blood cell count comes up. You're going to produce increased antibodies, and you're going to produce increased insulin, and this is all going to sort of be protective in the short term. And he found that what we do is our body prepares for a sustained attack by raising its immune functioning, and we're actually protected against stressful events for a while. He called this the resistance stage. But the thing is, when your body puts up its protective responses for a long enough period of time, it gets tired. All of those hormones, all of those physiological changes that are occurring, after a while, they begin to exhaust themselves. And then what he found is that your immune functioning actually tanks, and you become less immune than you were at the beginning. Your immune functioning is compromised. And what he argues is that during this exhaustion stage, we are actually more susceptible to negative environmental effects. And this is why stress is related to getting sick. The cortisol and the elevated heart rate and the chronic narrowing of vasoconstriction of the veins during the resistance stage can lead to heart problems. And so in a sense, being this fight or flight response has an extended period of time, has a lot of negative effects on your blood sugar level, your blood pressure, your heart, cardiovascular disease, and your immune functioning. So this is sort of the link between stress and our physical health. I don't know about you, but I remember before I started learning all about this stuff, I used to think it was kind of ridiculous when people talked about how stress can kill. I never understood how can something that is primarily mental affect something that is primarily physical. It all depends upon the activation of the amygdala and the cascade of the HPA axis and whether or not you have cortisol dumped into your blood system, cortisol and adrenaline dumped into your blood system for a long period of time. How long is an extended period of time? You know, that's an interesting point, Tara. One of the things, if I actually was reading the original article by Hans Seeley today, and you know what? These effects are different for individuals, including the amount of time it takes to get sick and how sick you will get based upon your stress level. So there's great variation, Tara, in how long it takes for stress to make you sick. The point being that any extended period of stress is probably something you should try to avoid. Was that fluffy enough for you, Tara? Did I pretend to answer your question while not answering it? That was my goal. Okay. Now, yeah, it depends. It depends. Okay. Now, the sympathetic nervous system was designed to maximize your chances of survival when faced with an acute stress experience. When you see that saber-toothed tiger, when you see the people from the other town charging at you with spears. So that's what it was designed for, but it was not designed for chronic stress that never goes away. If you remember early in the semester, we talked about ACEs. Did any of you take the ACEs questionnaire? Anybody ever take the ACEs questionnaire? Do you remember when we talked about Nadine Burke and we talked about ACEs? Okay, so what she was suggesting is that the chronic stress that was experienced by these children early in their childhood leads to the breakdown of these physiological processes and causes these children to get physical illnesses that kill them earlier in life than people who don't experience ACEs. And the damage may occur so gradually over a long period of time that you don't even realize that that's what it is that's causing this particular group of people to die at younger ages than other groups of people. Right? So brief periods of stress result in increased levels of white blood cells and elevated immunity. However, chronic stress leads to exhaustion of this system and decreased white blood cell count, which is what allows you to become susceptible to viruses and disease. We have increased heart rate and vasoconstriction of blood vessels because the cortisol and the vasopressin that are released cause your heart rate to shoot up and work harder. And this is going to be related to higher incidence of heart failure. And also, your body's producing high levels of glucocorticoids, I think is what they're called, in forms of glucose, which are good for giving you extra energy in the short term. But having high levels of glucose floating throughout your system are not good either. Okay? Glucose. Did I say glucose? I should have said, yes, glucose. All right. And so also this elevated anxiety does lead to problem behaviors. So you may be more likely to smoke. You may be more likely to overeat or to drink too much. So not only do you have these physiological effects, but people try to manage anxiety in such a ways that are non-optimal for their life in general. So we get all of these negative effects associated with the link between stress and sickness. Does that make sense? Now, your book is actually going to talk about two findings related to this. So if you look in your book, you'll see this little, it's right over here. What they did was they gave people the perceived stress index, kind of like I gave you, and then they actually gave them a nasal swab and exposed them to a cold virus. They then sent these people home to see and then measured to see whether or not they got the cold virus, whether or not they actually got sick from being exposed to the virus. And what they found was a positive correlation between the perceived level of stress and their likelihood of getting sick after being exposed to the virus, right? So this is an experiment which shows that elevated stress makes you more susceptible to illness. This is like I said, it's a very controlled experimental study. And then right behind me, you see the Holmes-Rahe stress inventory. And Holmes and Rahe found that people who had bigger stress events, not just chronic stress, but bigger, more stressful events in their life, were more likely to have health-related disorders, serious health-related disorders in the next 12 months. And I think what they found was people over a score of about 150 were more likely to have a serious health complaint in the next 12 months. So, has anybody in your family died? Have your parents been divorced? Did you get hurt? Did you go to jail? Did you fail an important course? Did you get pregnant? Did you break up with a boyfriend or girlfriend? Did you get a new boyfriend or girlfriend? All of these huge stressful events add up, and if you have enough of these in the course of a year, you're more likely to have a serious health-related change in the next 12 months. Okay. So, today I talked a little bit about the stress response, how it works physiologically, what hormones are related to it, and what the general adaptation syndrome, what the pattern of immune functioning that's related to the experience of chronic stress. Now, you might be saying, oh my God, this is terrible. I'm so stressed out that there's no hope for me. I'm going to get sick. What we're going to talk about on Thursday are personality styles, behaviors, and ways in which you can protect yourself from stress. So, Tara, you asked the question, how long does the stress go on before it starts to affect you? Well, you know what, Tara? That depends upon how good you are at dealing with stress. Some of you are not very good at dealing with stress. Some of you can handle anything, right? And so what we're going to talk about are personality styles that protect us from the negative effects of stress. And hopefully that'll answer your question a little more completely, Tara. Does anybody have any questions for me so far? Looks like we've got some great comments. Thanks everybody for chipping in on the chat bar today. It sounds like we had a great conversation going during lecture. Okay. Well, I'm going to assume that's all for today. Remember, I look forward to seeing you in Webinar A tonight. There are 2 surveys and a video in the webinar folder. Please watch the TED Talk. It's about 10-12 minutes long, and when you watch it, it'll be absolutely amazing to you. It's a very useful thing for you to protect yourself against stress. And then if you're interested, take the stress inventories to see what your level of stress is. So I hope to see everybody in class tonight. If you have any questions, I'll take them offline in the chat bar, or you can text me a remind message, and I'll be more than happy to reply to you there. If you don't have anything else, I'm going to go ahead and say goodbye. It was good to see everybody, and I will see you later on this week.